The Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. Because to maintain equality in a society, if you provide roti, kapda and makan, that is what helps maintain equality. Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, madam, just a comparison. In the years before the last 10 years, there were schemes like the JNNURM and the Rajiv Awas Yojana, which sanctioned a total of less than 13.5 lakh houses. By comparison, since 2015, the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana has sanctioned 42 million houses, and this year, 30 million more houses are going to get built. Madam, I compliment Honorable Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman ji on this historic budget. Historic because not only is it her 6th successive budget, I stand corrected, 7th successive budget, but the first one in the historic 3rd consecutive term headed by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Madam, I wish to put this budget in the context of what has happened in the last 10 years. I will speak on the budget, but this context is important, madam, because we have just a few minutes ago heard a pining for the colonial era. We have heard a little bit before that weird allegations that this government is like the British Raj, which has just been contradicted by my previous speaker, who was pining for the colonial era of the 1920s. Madam, there are terms to describe this kind of an attitude, but I will remain parliamentary. And so the parliamentary term for it in social sciences is referred to as a westernized oriental gentleman, a wog. And that's because while you pine for the former masters and the degrees that they give from their countries and denigrate ours, those former masters don't respect you. Those former masters don't respect you. They refer to you, when they are charitable, as wogs. Madam, the context of the last 10 years is as follows. When Prime Minister Modi formed his first government 10 years ago, he inherited from the previous government a huge backlog of undone reforms. In fact, in the words of my friend, the honorable member from Thiruvananthapuram, you might call it a long laundry list of unattempted reforms. Starting with GST, going on with the bankruptcy code, and we could keep going on and on. Madam, this budget is both very wide in its scope, but also very deep in addressing the reforms that are necessary to take Bharat forward. Madam, for the last 5 years from outside this house, I have admired Nirmala Sitharaman ji's previous budgets when, during the second Modi government, she consolidated on the deep fiscal reforms that were initiated in the first Modi government by my friend, the late Arun Jaitley. In the second term, during Nirmala ji's budgets being presented, India consistently remained the fastest growing large economy in the world. Now, sometimes questions are raised that what is the importance of being the fastest growing large economy? How does it benefit the Aam Aadmi? How does it benefit the average Bharatiya? I will tell you, madam. Because this growth has enabled the massive increases in allocations and the massive improvement in outputs and results that have been demonstrated in the last 10 years. And this has been commented upon by a wide variety of experts around the world. And I will refer to some of them. Now, if you look at Just a few weeks ago, looking at the data coming out for the financial year that we just completed and entered this financial year, these are the words of some of the pink papers in both India and abroad. I quote one, but this has been repeated many different times. Quote, in 2024, India has experienced significant economic growth, with exports reaching a record high of $776 billion at an 11.8% increase. The unemployment rate has dropped to a record low of 3.1%, and business activity and job creation are at an 18-year high, reflecting a robust economy. Now, Madam, some of my friends in the opposition benches get a little triggered when we cite some of these statistics. So I'll have to issue a trigger warning. But the data indicates, if you look at the job creation data, for example, look, I'll tell you where it is manipulated. The manipulated data comes from certain organizations where the head of the organization is the head of your manifesto drafting committee. When you cite organizations where the head of that organization is the head of your manifesto drafting committee, that is biased. This is not biased. These are RBI data. These are reflected by the World Bank and by the IMF and by India's pink papers. Next, just in the manufacturing and services sector, in the last 10 years, 89 million jobs have been created. Compare this with only 66 million in the previous 10 years. Look at the economic survey that preceded the budget just a couple of days ago. The economic survey points out that the percentage of youth who are deemed employable has improved from 34% to 51% in the last decade. And this work is being taken forward with many other steps to be mentioned in this budget, which I will come to. Madam Chairperson, I think while increasing these allocations, I'll refer to some of the increased allocations in infrastructure and other areas. While increasing these allocations, for example, my previous speaker just mentioned allocations to health. I think the House deserves to know that in the last 5 years, under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, Nirmala 9.5%, which is a new record. Madam, the system has to have a capacity to absorb, and that's why it has to be stepped up gradually. You cannot beat this high CAGR commitment to health. But Madam, I think one of the most impressive parts of the Modi government, especially in the last 5 years, is how the fiscal deficit has been managed, despite these high allocations for the growth of India. And Madam, I refer to the fiscal deficit, it gets referred a lot, but I want to take a moment to go behind why it is important. Madam, in this House, not just in the Treasury benches, but also in the opposition benches, there are many friends with whom I have personally sat and engaged in discussions with multilateral and global financial institutions. And they point out that the single biggest factor they look at when giving a country rating is the fiscal deficit. And that is what impacts inflation. That is what impacts our exchange rate, to what some of our friends have been referring to. Madam, the fiscal deficit, which was inherited 10 years ago at 4.5%, was continually brought down in Modi ji's first government until it reached 3.4%. And then the whole world was turned upside down because of the COVID pandemic, and India managed it far better than all other countries. But yes, of course, we saw a rise of the fiscal deficit to 9.2%. But the roadmap that has been shown since then by the Honorable Finance Minister has been rigidly adhered to, coming down year after year to 6.7%, 6.4%, 5.9%, 5.8%, 5.6%, 4.9% this year, and her commitment to bring it back down to 4.5% next year is extremely commendable. Madam, one of the challenges of high growth rate is sometimes it does create inequalities. And that is an allegation that some of our friends have been wrongly making. And I'll tell you why, madam. Because inequality is something that is measured. There is something called the Gini index, which measures inequality in a society across all countries. Madam, the reality is India's Gini index, which started out 10 years ago in the mid-30s, has remained in the mid-30s. Inequality has not changed by economic parameters. And madam, why this is particularly impressive? But Gini index, why? Just look it up. It's very simple. You can Google it. Now, madam, the important thing is the Gini index of India is far better than other BRICS countries like China and Brazil, which means despite being in the same economic strata, we are a far more equal society. What is even more impressive is that our Gini index compares more favorably than highly developed countries which have been allocating huge sums to welfare, such as the United States, such as the UK. Madam, the reason that our Gini index has been so impressive is because of the allocations and the outputs and the results of many of the aspects of the last 10 budgets, and particularly this historic budget. Let me give you an example, ma'am. The Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. Because to maintain equality in a society, if you provide roti, kapda and makan, that is what helps maintain equality. Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, madam, just a comparison. In the years before the last 10 years, there were schemes like the JNNURM and the Rajiv Awas Yojana, which sanctioned a total of less than 13.5 lakh houses. By comparison, since 2015, the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana has sanctioned 42 million houses, and this year, 30 million more houses are going to get built. Take, for example, ma'am, the Jal Jeevan Mission, another very key aspect of the various budgets of the Modi governments 1, 2, and 3, especially in the last few years. Ma'am, take a look at this. I'll give you the statistics. The Jal Jeevan Mission, just a few days ago, please have the patience to listen. Please have the patience to listen. The Jal Jeevan Mission. The Jal Jeevan Mission has achieved a milestone of 150 million rural tap connections, up from just 30 million 5 years ago. 5 times growth in just 5 years. This translates to 2.28 lakh villages and 190 districts achieving the Har Ghar Jal milestone. Similarly, Ayushman Bharat, which provides health coverage to hundreds of millions of Indians, the world's largest such program, again this year has got 7,300 crores allocation to take it forward. Madam, there have been some comments on this historic budget's focus on Purvodaya. I think it is important to discuss this. Now, the Prime Minister is on record as having a deep commitment to the Northeast and the East, which he has repeatedly explained, that unless these previously neglected regions get developed, Bharat is not going to get developed. And that is why he has visited the Northeast a record number of times, more than all his predecessors. And the budgets that have been allocated for the East and Northeast have been witness to this transformation. Now, Now, I will come to the point where you might really want to get excited. So, madam, the East had been traditionally neglected by the center. But what is more tragic is that within the East, there was discrimination from one state to another, despite ministers from those eastern states having had a role in Delhi. Madam, more than 20 years ago, when I first spoke at a budget, in those days the railways budget was different, separate. I was myself shocked to find some of the statistics. Pani. Madam, I still remember the statistics more than 20 years later. And please, my friends, please reflect on this. 20 years ago, when I first spoke on the budget, I found that West Bengal had the country's highest rail track density. And I remember the number. It was 42 kilometers per square kilometer. Right next door to West Bengal was my state of Odisha, lowest in the country, 14 kilometers per square kilometer. Every year, we used to appeal to the center to increase our allocation. We used to keep getting a few piddly 100 crores. And our appeal was, at least please give us 1,000 crores. In the first Modi budget 10 years ago, we were gobsmacked when the allocation straight away went 5 times to 5,000 crores. We did not then have a railway minister from Odisha. The Modi government does not believe that sabka saath, sabka vikas, sabka vishwas, sabka prayas is determined by proportionate representation, but it is for all India. Madam, this year, I thank the Honorable Railways Minister. The Railways allocation for Odisha is 10,500 crores, go a long way towards bringing Odisha up to the national average and beyond. Madam, when we talk of Purvodaya, even West Bengal is included. Yes, there has been a lot of talk about Bihar and Andhra Pradesh. In Odisha, some of our friends from other parties in the other house created a ruckus because they wanted to know how much has been allocated despite the Honorable Finance Minister specifically covering a wide array of investment opportunities. And just yesterday, from what has been presented in Parliament, it looks like our long-awaited coastal highway project, which is going into the DPR stage, is moving forward. And that is something like 2.5 times of what the Railways Minister has given us. This will be a total transformation for Odisha. I want to refer to a couple of important voices that have been celebrating India's success. These are global voices, madam. Madam, the World Bank, I'll come to another one first. The Modi government believes in finding win-win solutions which are fiscally sustainable, environmentally sustainable. There are those of our friends in other parties who run some states, who run their states into the ground because of freebies which they cannot fund. Then they keep running to the center asking for special funds. The Modi government works differently, sir. Look at electricity. The massive thrust on renewable energy, the massive thrust on solar has been something of a world record setter. If you look at it, sir, 10 years ago, India inherited a total installed capacity of 2.6 gigawatts. It is something that is being cherished and celebrated around the world, that today this photovoltaic capacity, solar cell capacity installed is 85.5 gigawatts.
Sir, please wind up in a minute, please.
Sir, the PM Surya Ghar Muft Bijli Yojana is another such win-win solution. And it was important that the Honorable Finance Minister mentioned that more than 1.28 crore applications have been received for this, because this proves that this is a yojana which is getting uptake, which is getting enormous interest. And not only will these households get 300 units of free electricity, but the extra electricity that will be generated and sold from their rooftops goes into their accounts. This is something that is being again talked about a lot everywhere else. Sir, as I start coming to the end of my speech on the budget, I want to talk about the digital transformation that has happened under the Modi government 1, 2, and 3, which is the talk of the world. Now, look at the startup environment. 10 years ago, we had a sum total of some 350 startups. This has grown 300 times in the last 10 years. And now India has more than 90,000 startups, third highest in the world. And these have been made possible by the various policies of the Modi government and the budgetary support for such development. Sir, the World Bank has made the following comment. I think it is worth mentioning. Quote, without the digital payment infrastructure such as Jan Dhan bank accounts, Aadhaar and mobile phones, the JAM trilogy, India may have taken 47 years to achieve the financial inclusion which it has achieved in only 6 years. This is the kind of transformation that is happening. Madam, in the limited time, so I apologize again. I apologize again. Sir, in the limited time available to me, I will not be able to go into each and every aspect of the budget, but suffice it to say that the thrust on infrastructure continues. And this is again the talk of the world. And this year's allocation of 11,000 crores continues that initiative, which is transforming India, creating jobs, and keeping us as the fastest growing economy.
Please conclude,
Sir. Yes, I'll just make this one last point and I will conclude. Sir, one of the most transformational infrastructure initiatives was started under the late Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji in the first NDA government, which was the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana scheme. Sir, I represent a coastal district of Odisha, Kendrapada, where many areas used to get completely cut off during the monsoon, and children could not go to school and citizens could not go to hospitals. But the PMJSY roads, concrete roads, made it possible that even something which may be 15 kilometers away becomes easily accessible on a bicycle. It has transformed life, but there are still areas that are left behind. And I compliment the Honorable Finance Minister that in this historic third Modi government, she has proposed the fourth phase of PMJSY, which is going to create connectivity to another 25,000 habitations. And it transforms places like Kendrapada, places around the country, especially in the northeast and previously neglected areas where many habitations, many villages used to be deprived of the basics of life, which are now being made available to them. Sir, I could go on and on. I will just conclude by saying that sometimes our friends in the opposition try to blame us for their own faults, whether infrastructure which is facing problems which was built during their time, or whether the banking situation. Sir, the transformation in the NPAs in the banking situation is noteworthy. I will conclude with that. Some 64,000 crores worth of assets have been seized, which was not happening, and it may be paining some of our friends because parties of nepotism, parties of corruption obviously had a stake in all those defaults. Now, some 15,000 crores have been returned to banks, and in this budget, the Honorable Finance Minister pointed out that 3,30,000 crores has been returned to creditors because of the policies of the Modi government so far. With that, I conclude my speech in favor of the budget. Thank you.